Everyone made fun of him because of his sick brother. Now he was standing in the bank with a shotgun. Everyone was lying on the floor. He took everything and headed for the exit. A young policeman with a pistol came around the corner and ordered him to put down his weapon. A shot rang out. He was lying on the floor, but to understand this, you have to go back a little. Before that, subscribe and write what time you were watching, and here's how it started. The small town of Cedar Creek, nestled in the shadow of the imposing Allegheny National Forest, was the kind of place where nothing ever happened until it did. For 35 years, Arthur Artie Finch had lived a life of quiet routine. His most exciting professional moment, a misplaced deposit slip at the First National Bank of Cedar Creek, where he was a low-level clerk. But the quietude of his existence masked a growing, suffocating desperation. It was the summer of 1987. The air was thick with the smell of drying hay and cheap engine oil from the local garage. For years, Artie, shy and perpetually overlooked, had been the target of the town's subtle, unrelenting cruelty. The snickers over his ill-fitting clothes, the dismissive wave from the bank manager, Mr. Hollis. He carried a stoic face, but his life was defined by the deep, internal ache of being a punchline. This internal wound was made external and catastrophic by his younger brother, Ethan. Ethan, a brilliant but fragile artist, lay in a specialized clinic 50 miles away, ravaged by a rare autoimmune disorder. The cost of his experimental treatment was a mountainous, unpayable sum. Artie's health insurance had long been exhausted. His second and third mortgages barely covered the monthly fees. The bank's daily ledger, which crossed his desk every morning, mocking him with its towering figures, became less an accounting document and more an answer. The answer was $3 million. Artie's transformation from timid clerk to meticulous planner was chillingly swift. He chose the day, September 14th, 1987, a mid-month Tuesday, less busy, less likely to have excess cash in the vaults, but still ample to meet his goal. His training as a teller, the countless hours observing security protocols, were now his blueprint. He knew the weakest link. The rooftop access panel, poorly secured and rarely checked, leading to the air conditioning units, and a sheer 60-foot drop to the back alley. A place a helicopter could, hypothetically, approach undetected in the pre-dawn gloom. The planning was clinical. The helicopter? Stolen under the cover of a thick morning fog from a private charter company 20 miles out. The pilot? Not a professional, but a desperate, low-level associate Artie had met through Ethan's shady clinic connections, a man named Silas. Silas only cared about his cut, $100,000 in cash, no questions asked. Artie wore a heavy, surplus military flight suit, his face obscured by a dark visor and helmet. He wanted no doubt. This was a professional job, not a disgruntled clerk. At 9:18 a.m. on September 14th, the stillness of Cedar Creek was violently broken. The deafening roar of a Bell 206 Jet Ranger helicopter descended upon the financial heart of the town. Archive. Photo of the First National Bank of Cedar Creek, 1987. A blurred, dark shape, a helicopter, hovers precariously over the low, flat roof. The image is grainy, suggesting a rushed snapshot from a bystander. Inside, the commotion was muted. Artie, armed with a non-lethal but convincing replica shotgun, moved with a horrifying, unfamiliar confidence. He didn't shout. He didn't waste time on theatrical demands. He knew exactly where the keys were kept and how long the inner vault's time lock took to cycle. "Don't move." His voice, distorted by the helmet's mic, was a low, mechanical growl. "Nobody gets hurt. Open the primary vault. Now." Teller Clara Jennings, the one who often made small, condescending jokes about Artie's lunch, froze, her face chalk white. Bank manager Hollis, a portly man who'd been reading the stock pages, stammered, The cash is, daily take is only 50 thou, son." Artie simply pointed the shotgun at the floor, a fraction of an inch from Hollis's polished wingtip. The metallic thunk of the gun on the marble floor resonated. Hollis fumbled with the combination. Artie was efficient, his movements rehearsed. He loaded the bundled $20s, $50s, and hundreds of dollars into two oversized canvas duffel bags. He didn't touch the deposit slips or coin rolls, only the cold, hard cash from the top four drawers and the primary safe's reserve. The total, counted later by terrified staff, $3,041,200. Artie was precise, almost surgical. The entire operation, from the moment the helicopter touched down to the moment Artie was back in the belly of the aircraft, took a chillingly efficient 7 minutes and 42 seconds. The getaway was supposed to be simple: 40 miles north over the national forest to a secluded, abandoned logging trail where a getaway car waited. But the skies over Allegheny were fickle. At 9:35 a.m., 10 miles northeast of Cedar Creek, a torrential, unexpected rain squall hit the helicopter. First responders, Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Thorne, a rookie whose cruiser radioed static, and his veteran partner, Detective Robert Bob Kincaid, were the first on the scene. They found a mangled wreck in a deep, isolated ravine. The Jet Ranger, broken and twisted, smelled of burned fuel and hot oil. The crash was violent. Inside the cockpit, they found Silas, the pilot, dead, skull fractured on the control panel, his hands still gripping the collective pitch. But the passenger seat, the seat where Artie Finch, or the man in the flight suit, should have been, was empty. Crucially, the two heavy canvas bags that should have contained $3 million were gone. Transcript, Sheriff's Dispatch Audio, 9:55 a.m., September 14th, 1987. Kincaid, Control, this is Kincaid, we're on site. Pilot's DOA. Single passenger. Seats empty. No sign of a second body. Repeat, no second body. Look, the bags are gone. No trace of the cash. Control. Affirmative, Kincaid. Stand by for state police homicide. Secure the perimeter. The official report, quickly assembled under intense media pressure, painted a picture of two men, a dead pilot and a robber who was likely thrown clear into the dense, rain-swollen ravine, his body and the missing cash washed away in the flash flooding comment to the area. It was clean, concise, and gave the public an easy narrative. But Kincaid didn't buy it. The area around the wreck was a muddy mess, but the door on Artie's side, while wrenched open, showed no drag marks, no trail of a heavy man crawling away with a fortune. Detective Kincaid, a methodical man whose sharp mind was usually hidden behind a tired, smoke-infused exterior, was assigned lead. He was skeptical of the washed-away theory. Artie Finch had vanished. No body, no money, no witnesses to a second person escaping the wreck. The town dismissed Finch as a coward who died in a desperate attempt to flee. Kincaid saw a gap. For weeks, the dense forest floor was scoured. Every square foot of the ravine, every stream and tributary was checked. Nothing. Kincaid, driven by an unshakable instinct, spent his nights poring over Artie Finch's meager life. The hospital bills, the subtle derogatory comments in his personnel file, the mounting medical bills for his brother, Ethan. He found a man beaten down by life, not a seasoned criminal. The first real break came not from the forest, but from a mundane piece of office trash. Back at the bank, reviewing the contents of Artie's old, overflowing trash can, Kincaid found a crumpled piece of paper, miraculously overlooked in the initial sweep. It wasn't a confession or a map. It was a receipt. Archive, facsimile of a cash register receipt, dated September 13th, 1987, 8:43 p.m. Store, Riverton Sporting Goods and surplus item. Rope, 60 feet. Nylon, heavy duty. Item, carabiner, steel, LG. Total, $38.95 payment. Cash clerk, CR. 60 feet. The exact drop from the bank's rooftop access panel to the ground. Why buy rope if the plan was to land and take off? The rope wasn't used at the crash site. Artie hadn't escaped the crash. He had escaped the robbery before the crash, leaving Silas alone to pilot the helicopter and take the fall. Kincaid realized with a jolt that was not a random pilot who died, but a professional dupe. The crash was a meticulously planned cover, designed to kill the main witness, destroy the getaway vehicle, and explain the vanishing robber and money. Artie Finch was never in the crash. He had lowered himself, $30 million in tow, down the backside of the bank and into a waiting vehicle before Silas even took off on the rooftop. The question wasn't where Artie Finch's body was, but where he went next. If you want to know what happened to the $3 million and the missing man, subscribe and let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. The Riverton's receipt was a revelation, but not a conviction. It showed an elaborate pre-plan, not an aftermath. For 12 agonizing years, Detective Kincaid, now Lieutenant Kincaid, his hair grayer and his weariness more pronounced, carried the weight of the unsolved case. Artie Finch was officially filed as missing, presumed deceased, the money a total loss. The First National Bank of Cedar Creek folded 3 years later, a victim of the massive, uninsured theft and the small town's lingering distrust. Ethan Finch, Artie's brother, against all odds stabilized. The costly, experimental treatment had somehow continued. Kincaid had an internal file, meticulously cross-referenced. Operation Hummingbird, the name he'd given the case, referring to the chopper's brief, fleeting visit. He knew Artie wasn't dead in the woods. He had been an employee, not a master criminal. He must have left a trail. The case was resurrected in 1999 by the insistent energy of a new transfer to the State Cold Cases Unit, Detective Anya Sharma. Young, digitally savvy, and armed with new forensic techniques, Sharma wasn't weighed down by the local history. She found Kincaid's files and the narrative of the rope. "Lieutenant," she said one chilly November morning, "if he rappelled down 60 feet of rope, he didn't take a car from the bank alley. That alley goes nowhere. It's a dead end, only for service vehicles. He had to be picked up. He needed a driver." Sharma's analysis moved the focus from the forest to the town's periphery. The old paper records and microfiche of 1987 offered a tiny detail that Kincaid's analog eyes had missed: a citation. Archive. Excerpt from Traffic Citation Log. Cedar Creek PD, September 14, 1987, 9:25 a.m. Violation: illegal parking, blocking service access, location: rear of Cedar Creek Public Library, approximate 1 block from Bank Alley. Vehicle: 1979 Ford Granada, yellow, taxi company. Vehicle driver: Jerry Joker Lewis, taxi driver, age 45, disposition, paid fine, $25 on September 16, 87. Jerry Lewis, a local cab driver known for his nervous chatter and mounting gambling debts, was the perfect patsy. He'd parked illegally, received a ticket only 3 minutes after the helicopter was seen over the bank, and was never questioned because he was not near the bank's front door. Kincaid and Sharma found Lewis working at a regional bus depot in a different state, his life a pattern of small, meaningless jobs. Kincaid, sitting across from him in a sterile, fluorescent-lit interrogation room, noticed Lewis's hands trembled, not from age, but from remembered fear. "Mr. Lewis," Kincaid began, his voice low, "let's talk about a $3 million fare you picked up 12 years ago." Lewis broke immediately, a dam of fear collapsing. He confessed Artie had offered him $50,000 for a 5-minute wait behind the library at 9:20 a.m. He confirmed Artie had appeared, dropping 2 heavy, stained canvas bags into the back of the yellow Ford. He confirmed the flight suit and helmet. "He told me he had a delivery. Said it was important medical equipment," Lewis stammered, wiping his brow. "He paid me $50,000 in $100 bills right there, right on the spot. Said he was going to the city to see his brother." This was the first major turnaround. Artie Finch wasn't a victim of the crash. He was a fugitive who disappeared into the metropolitan anonymity, armed with cash, 12 years ago. The recovered testimony didn't bring them closer to Artie. It only affirmed his intent. But it brought them to a new moral dimension: Ethan Finch. Ethan had survived. He was living in a quiet suburban community, now an art teacher, his illness in remission. His ongoing treatment, however, was still immensely costly. Someone was paying. Kincaid and Sharma visited Ethan. He was a ghost of the past, pale and thin, but alive. He admitted his brother had told him he'd won a small lottery and invested the winnings. He was the best brother, Ethan whispered, tears in his eyes. He was always protecting me. He was my whole world, detective. Ethan Finch, quoted from interview transcript, November 1999, he sent the money in unmarked envelopes through a series of offshore accounts. I never asked where it came from. I knew. I had to live. He chose for me to live. The moral ambiguity was a gut punch. Artie Finch was a criminal who stole to save a life, and the stolen money was keeping an innocent man alive. The $3,041,200 wasn't being used for mansions and fast cars. It was paying for medical survival. This conflict made the pursuit difficult. Sharma, running the list of Artie's known associates and the small medical clinic's founders, uncovered a paper trail leading to the clinic's chief financial officer, Wallace Green. Green's company had surprisingly good cash flow in the mid-90s, despite a wave of medical malpractice suits. Kincaid reviewed the old paper documents again, the forgotten files from the initial days of the investigation. He found a grainy, water-damaged 1985 photo from a local church charity dinner, tucked in a box marked unprocessed artifacts. It showed Artie Finch standing awkwardly in the background. But in the foreground, shaking hands with the bank manager Hollis, was a younger, smirking Wallace Green. Green had been a former teller at First National, Artie's supervisor, before moving into the private sector. He and Artie knew each other well. This was the final turn. Artie hadn't simply robbed the bank. He'd gotten inside information on the cash reserves and the vault combination from his former, disgruntled boss. Confronted with the photograph and the paper trail linking his company's funding to offshore accounts mirroring the ones that paid for Ethan's treatment, Green broke. He confirmed Artie's internal conflict, the shame of the bullying, and his desperate love for his brother. Green had provided the information and the connection to Silas, the pilot, in exchange for $200,000. He confirmed Artie's plan to flee the state, disappear, and pay for Ethan's life, his only condition being that Green never reveal the source of the funds. Green admitted the guilt had been crushing. But where was Artie? 12 years is a long time for a fugitive, even a virtuous one. Green didn't know. The truth came not from a confession, but from a random hiker's discovery in the deepest, most inaccessible part of the Allegheny National Forest, only 4 miles from the helicopter crash site. In the spring of 2000, Kincaid and Sharma stood over a shallow grave. The remains were skeletal, but clothing fragments and dental records confirmed the identity: Arthur Finch. He was wearing the same flight suit, torn and rotted. Next to him was a metal box, rusted shut, containing a single, waterproof, sealed ledger. Artie hadn't escaped to the city. He had escaped the robbery, met Lewis, and then, for reasons unknown, returned to the very woods where his death was supposed to be staged. The ledger, written in Artie's familiar, precise clerk's handwriting, contained the financial records of the $3 million. Every deposit, every wire transfer to the offshore accounts, every payment for Ethan's treatment. The book ended abruptly in late September 1987, only 2 weeks after the robbery. Kincaid looked at the final entry, a brief, shaky note. Did what I had to. The cure is the money. Ethan lives. I did not get to. Too tired to keep running. The forest will keep my secret. Artie Finch had not been fleeing. He had been heading to his final hiding place. He died of exposure and exhaustion only weeks after the heist, collapsing in the vast wilderness he thought was the safest place to protect his secret. The $3 million, through the careful planning and the help of Wallace Green, continued to flow for a full 12 years after his death. A life insurance policy paid in stolen cash. Wallace Green was prosecuted and convicted for conspiracy and embezzlement. The $800,000 remaining from the stolen funds was seized. However, due to the unique circumstances, the money having directly funded life-saving medical care, the court allowed Ethan Finch, now a respected teacher, to keep his home and continue his stable life, albeit under immense public scrutiny. The community was left with a painful choice: condemn a thief who saved his brother, or forgive a man who broke the law for love. Lieutenant Kincaid retired shortly after his internal file finally closed. He often visited the memorial plaque installed for the victims of the crash, including Silas, the dupe, but always thought of the quiet man buried 4 miles away, whose final act was a ledger of self-sacrifice. The archive of the vanished man showed that sometimes a crime is simply a desperate, broken measure of love. What do you think? Was this justice served or a tragic necessity? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.